walking into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. McGann, McGone. That seems to be the phrase for today, McGann, McGone. Going to be interesting to see how that plays out as Don McGann will be finding his way to the exit. And who will be taking his place? That the question. I think on a lot of people's minds. But before we get into all of the other stuff, we are approaching Labor Day weekend. For me, one of the more sacred of holidays. It is an opportunity to reflect on all of the struggles, all of the battles, all of the wars, all of the beatings and the bloodshed and the death that built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. All of the people who fought for the 8-hour day, for safe working conditions, to end child labor, to push for maximum hour laws and minimum wage laws, vacation, weekends, health care, retirement, down the list, all things that today we seem to take for granted, but just 70, 80 years ago, none of it. And this is one of those weekends, one of those holidays. I know it's the end of summer. It's barbecue time. Going to be the last. Break out the beers and do that. Celebrate a day off. Celebrate a day from toil. Celebrate a day of camaraderie and brotherhood and all of that stuff. But also remember what it took to fight for what we take for granted every day. It used to be the workday was sun up to sundown, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. It used to be you weren't paid in cash. You were paid in company script to be spent at the company store who overcharged you. And you got health care from the company doctor who gouged you. And oh, by the way, you couldn't live wherever you wanted because you were in the company town and you paid the company master. And heaven forbid you get injured or killed on the job, because now you're out. Or you could trade your wife. And if you think I'm kidding, go back and read our history. So this weekend, the hope is that people will take to that kind of reflection that I think is so very important. We are taking off the next couple of days. Big changes in the new year for us. Our anniversary is Labor Day. This will be our 13th anniversary of doing this program. And it's been almost a blink of the eye. We started as a kind of a hobby on a weekend day, trying to add some bit of balance to the radio airwaves, tried to change some of the narrative. And, it's at this time I like to, remember why I started doing this. I was driving a truck, I was a Teamster driving a truck, listening to my Teamster buddies tell me that, we'd make more money if there were no union here. The union's outdated. We don't need this. And it's because what they were being told. It's what they were being inundated with day in and day out because they heard nothing else. And when we started this program to attempt to add some balance, the best thing I ever heard from someone is, you made me think. You made me think about what I was believing and made me question my own thought process. To me, that's the greatest compliment you can give me, is that you thought about something differently. May not have agreed. Look, I had for years people who would send me an outline of my show and tell me, you're an idiot, I disagree, you're stupid. Oh, this was a good point. And, I appreciate that, because we have to be able to come to some bit of common ground. And labor used to be one of those places. Work used to be one of those places where you fought for common ground. We all want decent wages. We all want good benefits. We all want safe working conditions. We all want opportunity for our kids and our grandkids. And we all want the prosperity that our grandparents sought out to hand to the next generations. We all want that. I've yet to find somebody who goes, boy, I wish I made less money. Boy, I wish my health care were worse. Boy, I wish they'd take this retirement away. But we don't have to ask for it because they're doing it. The thing is we've got to stand up, fight back, and say no more. And if you look at the numbers, that are out, the economy's booming. According to Donald Trump, it's great. And if you're a financial guy on Wall Street, wow, tingly in the panties. Oh boy, lots of warm and fuzzy. But if you're a working stiff trying to make ends meet, things aren't much better. And all of the rosy rhetoric and all of the good PR, sorry, not buying. So for this Labor Day, think about how we got where we are, what it took to fight for the 8-hour day. I just had this conversation the other day. A guy I know who I work with lives up the road, up 81 a little ways. I-81 runs through Pennsylvania. And on the way to where he lives is a monument to the Latimer Massacre. Back 80 years ago, you had striking miners marching from Allentown up to Scranton. And at this one point in Latimer, the sheriff there had deputized a bunch of gun thugs, just a bunch of degenerates, gave them Winchester rifles. And as the marching, striking miners, unarmed, marched through this particular area where there's a steep drop off on the one end and a high hill here, they were on the high ground, shooting these people in cold blood to where the only place they could go was completely off the edge. And there's a monument there to that moment. And this person had lived almost his entire life there and had never known what that was. Had never really heard about that massacre. And look, I'm not surprised. We traveled this entire country and labor's history has been eviscerated. Which is why, again, I come back to why I do this program. Why we produced Labor History in 2, where we put those clips out for people to get a little bit, just a little taste of what it took for us to get what we have today. And sadly, every day, what that greatest generation fought for, all of the progressive values that moved us forward are under attack right now. This administration, like none other, is attacking the rights of workers to collectively bargain, to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, to push for sound retirement, for good health care, for safe working conditions. And we, as a working class in this country, had better wake up, and quickly. Because the day after Labor Day, the next round of attacks starts as Brett Kavanaugh begins his process towards confirmation. And if he is seated on the Supreme Court, you can kiss the rest of the 20th century goodbye. all of that progress, all of that fighting, all of the bloodshed, all of the pain and the suffering that people fought for so that we could have a better life. We could have rights. We could have a voice on the job. It's all going to be gone. If you look at what the last Supreme Court session just brought us, forced arbitration clauses, a national right to work regime for public sector workers brought on by Mr. Balls and Strikes, stare decisis, John Roberts, we believe in decided law. We got a lot of work to do, folks. So as I said, this Labor Day, very important to, yes, enjoy, to, yes, celebrate with your family, enjoy the last so-called weekend of the summer, but also to reflect. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me what you're doing this Labor Day weekend as we take our little respite, as we take our little break and enjoy the holiday as well. You can share that with me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break, right back with our good friend Scott Dworkin. Going to share some of his thoughts on the McGahn, and, well, everything else around the Trumpster. Right back. Stick around.
Own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That's the day 2,500 steelworkers at the Pressed Steel Car Company near McKees Rock, Pennsylvania, walked off the job. It was the second walkout in 2 weeks. Workers effectively shut down production of armor plate for the Navy, shell forgings for the Army, and railroad cars used to transport military material. The company had gone back on promises of holding a collective bargaining election. Steelworkers Organizing Committee Sub-Regional Director Abe Martin told the Pittsburgh Press that while the union had not called the strike, workers had, quote, walked out themselves because they are fed up with the company's discrimination against them. SWAC had been trying to organize the plant for years, but the company had engineered an election for a so-called independent union 18 months earlier when the complex was only operating at half capacity. Workers walked out at the beginning of the month and ended their strike on the guarantee that negotiations for a new election would begin. But when they returned, they found that some were stripped of their seniority, while others were forcefully transferred to new departments. The day before, machine shop workers on the afternoon shift were fed up and dropped their tools. Word spread throughout the evening, and by early morning, picket lines were solid and production had come to a complete standstill. When the company tried to force reopening of the plant after Labor Day, 1,500 workers formed picket lines at the gate to stop scabbing. They returned to work 10 days later in compliance with a request by the National Defense Mediation Board. The NLRB rejected SWAC's election petition 2 months later, but SWAC persisted and won exclusive bargaining rights the following June. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So some interesting news today, as it appears the Mueller investigation is, one, heating up, but two, on the Manafort front, they've asked the judge to extend the opportunity to retry Manafort for those 10 charges that he wasn't found guilty or not guilty. They were ruled a mistrial, but they've asked the judge, and the Manafort people did not object. So you got to wonder if there's some pleading going on, some back and forth. And here to share some thoughts on that, our good friend Scott Dworkin, co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also host of the wonderful Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
How you doing, Rick?
I'm good. So what do you make of this? What do you make of the Mueller folks saying, hey, we need a little more time to decide whether we're going to retry Manafort on those 10 counts that were ruled a mistrial?
They're going to keep everyone accountable for every single lie and every single crime that you broke I'm thinking that they're going to evaluate, just give it more time so it's less controversial, maybe. So that I'm not sure on the timing front, but I'm almost sure, like it's almost a certainty. There's no reason at this point for him not to try it, because all it's going to do is extend whatever time he had and make an example out of him, and it's for crimes that he committed. Yep. And so I don't think it hurts to go after him because he's already won that big battle, and so these other 10 counts, even if he were for whatever reason it was another, no vote throughout, I think he'd still, Mueller comes out the winner. So it just depended on, whether or not he wants to try it. And I think he just wants to make it, he wants to make it clear that no one is going to break any laws.
And that's a good thing. But, let me ask you this, because there was some talk that there were some plea deals going on. There was some conversations while the jury was deliberating, and that broke down. Could this be part of that? The Mueller team saying, hey, we're going to keep these over his head. And even his lawyers are saying, well, we're not going to fight it, because if we do fight it, they'll just recharge him immediately. So could that be part of it, you think?
Yeah, I mean, he really is at the end of his rope. There's not much he can do revolving around any of this. He can't really push back much. He doesn't have many ways to communicate with people, and when he does, it's a limited capacity. He really is disadvantaged at this point and put into a corner, and he doesn't have many choices to make. On top of that, since he was found guilty already, it's going to be very hard for even Mueller to make a deal with him on that, or use that as an example where it would be dissolved or anything along those lines. That takes a lot of work. So he'd have to give up something, absolutely crazy,
right,
involving evidence or something he said and corroborates. But, it really is, he's in a spot where he's either going to be in prison for the rest of his life, or he is going to spew everything.
Or he grabs the shovel and digs up all the bodies.
Right.
But, here's the thing. Or there's the other option, which is Trump pardoning him, which, I'm looking at the news today. The headline read, McGahn, McGone. When he goes, do we see someone come in who, would be okay with firing Sessions, and then okay with firing Rosenstein, and okay with firing Mueller? Do you see that as the path after the midterms?
I don't see Donald making it that far as president. That's my personal opinion, just based on everything I see right now, with his closest circle and also personal family members, obviously, next, and them being American co-conspirators, his campaign being fully implicated in that, the media knowing how to cover it, media knowing how to fight back against his tweets and the messaging, and how to actually drive something home to the American people. I don't see a lot changing right now. I think what we really gotta worry about is whether or not he's gonna fire Sessions, as weird as that may sound, because that just, it kind of muddies the waters in regards to who's in charge of what, and then also makes it easier for him to try and pressure firings below that. But I think it's all a game to distract from everything else that he's doing that's actually, absolutely crazy. He just praised himself, even after the death toll numbers came back, for thousands of deaths in Puerto Rico. And the Puerto Rican mayor, basically, she said verbatim that the Trump administration is responsible for thousands of Americans' deaths in Puerto Rico.
No, I saw that, and I'm like, really? Not even George Bush had the stones to say, when it came to light that how bad they boogered it up, that he would take that, look, we've done great that kind of line, which just, but I guess not surprising. But I want to go back to Sessions for a second, because, this week we were talking about, got Lindsey Graham now saying, well, the president should be able to have his guy, after saying originally back in 2017 that there'd be holy hell to pay if Jeffy were gone. And it seemed like, Lindsey was giving the okay, but to wait till after the midterms. I'm curious your thoughts.
Maybe he's just, extending the goalpost. It seems maybe he knows how to negotiate with Trump, and that's how he can kind of start, because it's positive articles about Trump and Graham supporting him. but I'm not sure if Graham is smart enough to pull that off. I think he's a coward, a spineless coward that is serving Trump's bidding with either the promise of a lucrative job after he's done in the Senate, or bribes that he's getting right now, compromise that he may have, people may have on him. And as a new movie comes out on Friday, it'll reveal that the intelligence agencies in the United States believe that there are over 1,000 Russian spies that are that have spent their lives spying, for the most part, in the United States. We've got some big problems here. We're going to have to face.
But I thought the Cold War was over.
That was the Cold War. This is a real war.
That's an excellent point. I mean, because you look at this and they have infiltrated not just, probably some of the highest level offices in the land, but wow, they've got our divisions down pat. And every day I see, all of this stuff going, they're really dividing us even further than we've divided ourselves. And they know where the fault lines are probably better than we do. Right.
And that's what's, it's kind of good to expose the wounds of the country. That's the only positive take I can have on it, is that also is a way for us to heal, possibly, or expose that, and it not be as controversial the next time it comes up, if it's something that divides us. But I also think that there's a lot of fake divisiveness in this country right now, where it is trolls and bots that are responding and promoting things, and it's on the other side. A majority of the people in America, are supportive of the resistance, and that's overwhelmingly clear. Independents, Republicans, Democrats, Green Partiers, everybody, we're going to band together and vote Democrat this fall.
And that's the hope. But here's the thing: you just had the president say that if that happens, violence in the streets. Now, caveat, he doesn't really want to see it, but if it happens, if the blue wave happens, there's going to be violence, he says.
The resistance is a peaceful organization. We endorse nothing of violence. Even, mostly, we can have sort of rhetoric that is good hyperbole, but we toe the line on that. We don't.
Yeah, but Scott, I don't think he's talking about the resistance. I think he's talking about those nitwits running around in militias and the white supremacists and the Nazis that he's been dog whispering to with these QAnon people for a while. I think that's what he's talking about.
Well, they wouldn't have to take on the resistance. They'd have to take on the United States military and our police forces. So good luck to them on that. I have our bet placed very heavily on our side. Because their job is to protect the American people and keep us safer and keep us, in a good spot security wise. And if someone else wants to rebel, that's who they're fighting against. And whoever's president would then take action against them. And as we've seen every single time in American history, the federal government wins.
Good point. So let me ask you this, because, I'm looking at this dog whistle stuff, and a lot of it isn't even really dog whistle. Because when I heard Trump say that was the first thing that popped into my head. All these crazy people now having carte blanche. Go on. It's open season on people that you disagree with. And now I see last night you had the election in Florida where Gillum wins the Democratic nomination. And you have DeSantis who's saying, well, we can't monkey it up. And we're not supposed to think that that's some kind of a racial jab. I'm curious your thoughts on it.
I feel as if, he was told to say something along those lines. And I just looked at the cadence and I looked at the full script of what he actually said there. It seemed like it was rehearsed. It also seemed like something Trump would say. So it seems like it came from the White House. That's I would guess that most of the things that DeSantis says come from Trump or approved by Trump. Or his press office, probably by Trump personally, because he knows Florida. I know Florida better than anybody else. And he helped DeSantis win and, had 20 different donors, gave over $885,000 to him to, buy him off. And he even accepted Russian money that we uncovered. And so it extends the stink of, his stuff in Florida. And now what they're trying to do is they're trying to act like us having a progressive in place is socialist, left wing, when it's a Democrat who's going to run as a progressive and hold to their values and not float to the center,
right,
and drive out the vote and have a principled person. And I think that's going to be, the next governor in Gillum. And that's, I see a governor there. You see a template, what it used to be 20 years ago with DeSantis, and you see a person who's a rubber stamper with Trump, who does ads that, I don't know if you saw this ad or not, but he has his infant daughter, he's building a wall with her out of little toy bricks, and he's like reading from Trump's books to like his son, and he's endorsing this maniac in it. And it's terrifying because, it's now spreading. That message resonated with his base, but I mean, look at who he was running against. So he really didn't have much opposition. Adam Putnam was a joke. So anyways, I think it's going to be clear. I think Gillum's going to win by 5 or 6 points, but we're not going to be able to see that until later. And I just think in Florida, I think progressives are going to outnumber them. I
sure hope so, because look, Florida's been a crazy state for quite some time.
Yeah.
And especially when you've got Senator Nelson saying, hey, the rig and the fixin' is already in.
Right.
I worry that happens as well. But, I look at this, and, the first thing I saw this morning when I woke up is, it's Bernie Sanders' guy against Trump's guy.
Right.
Trying to again, inflame those divisions and reopen those wounds of 2016. And again, just to try and tear the Democrat apart. And look, give them credit. They've got the right spin, but let's hope that people see through it.
Gillum is Florida's guy, and he could be referred to as a mayor, but he's definitely not just Bernie's guy. That's not how it works in our party. He holds to the broad progressive values that we hold dear, and he is going to run on that. He won the primary on that. And he's going to be very straightforward about how he stands on things like guns. He's not going to go out to gun rights groups and change his stance. It's a guy who's going to hold true, and I think he's going to win because of it. I think that any of his links to Bernie are great. He should get his links to Hillary Clinton. He should get his links because they're going to paint him as tied to her anyways.
Right.
And then he should get, I think what will happen is Obama will campaign for him a lot.
I hope so. I mean, Florida would be the governor's mansion in Florida would be a big step forward, considering
right.
If the Republicans were to pick up 3 more governor's mansions, we could have a constitutional convention, and really they could do some major damage. Yeah,
I think Joe Biden will also be on the campaign trail a lot, and so will Michelle Obama. So we have a lot more on the bench that people want to come and visit. And I'm guessing that we'll have some Republicans of yesteryear come on board and help with Democrats and what we're doing. But it's going to be, Florida's going to be a tough, you're right. It's a weird state. I've worked in all over the state, and it's like having different states within one state. And so it's really interesting to see this happen like this. But I think at the end of the day, progressives are going to win, and that is our template, because people can't say, what do you stand for? They can say, oh, you stand for social. No, because they sound crazy at that time. When they call us socialists, they sound crazy. And so let them keep on trying that madness, but it's better than them saying we don't stand for anything.
Yeah, I mean, so you got this DeSantis, saying we're not going to monkey things up. And what was it, just the other, I guess Monday it was, where you had the governor of South Carolina comparing Democrats to dogs. I mean, they're not even trying to code their hatred and their racism at this point. I mean, it's just blatant.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it's hidden in plain sight, just like a lot of signals Trump sent to Russia and his friends. and maintaining pardons and things like that. There's really, again, I don't know if he should. I don't know what we're going to do yet. I just know that we have to take back the House in November. I know it's really tough to get through this because for everybody, and I know that everybody's having a tough time. But just to revisit the fact that I just want to make sure that it's clear, like we have a long road ahead, but I think winning and voting in November is the most important thing.
Yeah, and we need to get out and we need to register and we need to get people to the polls, all of that stuff. And you know, I'm looking at a lot of the insanity that's going on, though. You know, all the stuff that's going on down in Georgia, where they wanted to close 7 of the 9 polling places in the one county. They kicked 561,000 people off the voting rolls because evidently they didn't vote enough in their opinions. You look at what's going on in North Carolina with the possible having to redraw the congressional districts this close to the election because they need it. There's a lot of balls in the air that people need to keep their eyes on the prize.
What do you think is going to be the biggest problem? I don't know if you looked at North Carolina a lot, but do you think that they're actually going to be able to change the districts before the election?
I honestly don't think so. I mean, there's such a short amount of time. By the time you got the districts drawn and then refigured out who was living in those districts and had, I don't know. I fear the Republicans keep that gerrymandered state for another 2 years.
They've been hitting us hard. You know, I lived there for a while, and it's really not easy to be there. It's like especially when it had a Republican governor before it had a Democratic one now. And right when he was coming into power, they started stripping all the gubernatorial powers away from the governor's office.
Yep.
It's showing how nasty they can get. But what's the only good that comes from that is the guts that will come when Democrats come back to reset everything, and how harshly they reset it and how progressive bent it will be. Because that's what happens when you don't negotiate is, there's always going to be that swing back. But yeah, I think North Carolina, and there's, I don't know if you saw, obviously the situation in Puerto Rico is still bad, but like, what exactly do you think Trump should do about it? Like, can he actually save people in Puerto Rico? Is there? I
don't think he cares.
Why not? Like, why? That's what
I truly. The honest answer is I don't think he thinks it's part of the United States. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to go, that's just Puerto Rico. That's not our problem. You go, no, it's a U.S. territory.
Right.
They have voted to become a state. We just haven't allowed it to happen. They are our responsibility. We need to do everything we can do to take care of those people because they're American citizens. And I think most people, because it's an island out of sight, out of mind, and especially because you're talking about, minorities, don't care. And I don't think Trump cares one iota.
Yeah, it drives me nuts. I want to get your take on it because it really, I've seen the devastation and everything going on down there, and I start to see other cities start to get chipped away like this and degraded and lose funding, and it just slowly is getting all chipped away, including our morals and everything else. So you see that on a local level, as you said, like in Georgia and North Carolina and different places, like they're slowly turning this into I don't know if you'd call it a totalitarian state or, but, an empire, or where Trump is the ruler and he rules all. And, I mean, I can't believe that, you see Democrats stick up to Obama to his face, you know what I mean? And now they're afraid of him because they're going to.
I just talked about this the other night. I said, look, I liked President Obama. I voted for him twice. But, when he was wrong, I beat up on him because, in fact, I was harder on him and the Democrats than I am on Republicans because I think Democrats should know better. I think they should do better. And, I don't agree with anybody 100% of the time, probably not even myself. But, I've heard Republicans say, I agree with absolutely everything Trump has done. And they cannot look at him critically in any way, shape, or form. And you're right. It's a form of hero worship.
Yeah, and it's a false prophet. If they're worried about talking about Revelation, but it really hits people hard, I think, to realize that they were duped.
Yeah. That
they were duped by Russia. They were duped by Donald Trump. And so that's a big mix of emotions, especially people who, are in their 50s and 60s who voted for Trump and realized they were fooled and scammed by the Russians and also Trump himself. He was a fraud.
I hope they wake up to it. I do. I hope you're right. I hope they're seeing it. I hope they turn off the fake news on Fox. I hope they turn off the crazy right-wing echo chamber and have some thoughts banging around between their ears. But I'm not seeing it with the people that I know. Let me ask you one more thing, last line of questioning, because you saw what happened over the weekend and on Monday with McCain's passing and Trump's petulant reaction and the whole arms folded thing and all of that. I wanted to get some thoughts out of you.
It was a big man baby. He sat there and it was just like, it was exactly how if Putin were to order him to react in a certain way, I think he did it verbatim. And that's what I saw, is I saw a Russian or, a Russian government official or oligarch sitting there in that chair and responding to McCain's death. And that's what we saw there.
I would think that the Russian oligarch or Putin would have been a little more stone-faced, a little more, not showing the cards. And I just, it's just one of these amazing things. What do you think of the reaction by Schumer to say, well, let's name the building after McCain? Too soon?
No, I think it's great for Democrats, especially, to offer up ways that we can work bipartisan, even if it's very simple.
Yeah, they did. They gave up a bunch of federal judgeships, and I fear they're going to roll over on Kavanaugh.
Well, I don't know about those kind of negotiations. that's kind of bringing I guess a spatula to a machine gun fight. I mean, it's really we've got to equip ourselves better, and I think the resistance in the party, that is going to be the revival of everything. It's the Tea Party 2.0, but it's I think we're bigger, we're more united. The biggest problem, though, is to make sure that we get people to the polls, and it's going to depend on candidates and everybody else holding to their progressive values and saying how they truly feel. Not muddying the waters, just stand by what you are.
There you go. Scott, I appreciate the time, the thoughts, good stuff. Look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thanks, brother.
Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Make sure you check out his podcast, The Dworkin Report. We'll get links out at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day that became known for the Quebec Bridge disaster in Canada. Workers were building a cantilever bridge over the St. Lawrence River. This was not an easy task. The river was 2 miles wide at its narrowest point. The river was deep, moved quickly, and was icy in the winter. But in the late 1880s, businessmen in Quebec who wanted to keep up trade with Montreal decided the river had to be spanned. The project did not begin for more than a decade due to a lack of funds. Finally, the Canadian government supported the project to improve the nation's railway infrastructure. Theodore Cooper, a respected American bridge designer, was signed on for the project. Despite concerns about the bridge's design, he never visited the site due to illness. 86 men were working on the project that fateful day. Their workday was drawing to a close when the bridge suddenly collapsed. 75 men plunged to their deaths. Some of their bodies were never found. The bridge collapsed because of design flaws. The official report of the disaster noted that the loss of life, quote, might have been prevented by the exercise of better judgment on the part of those in responsible charge of the work for the Quebec Bridge and Railway Company and the Phoenix Bridge Company. Unfortunately, it was not the last tragedy trying to cross the St. Lawrence. After the bridge collapsed, the Canadian government took over the project. A partial collapse on that effort killed 13 more workers in 1916. The bridge finally opened in 1917. Its completion came at a high price, costing $22 million and 86 lives.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, McGahn. Does that mean Jeffy goes? Does that mean Rosenstein? Does it mean Mueller? Does that mean that's the first domino of everything else? It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out and who they replace McGahn with. Which bootlicker, which sycophant, which Trump loyalist, which yes man. And who would want the job, honestly? You know, given what's going on, who'd want the job? Here to share some thoughts, Justin Duckham, Talk Media News. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here as always.
So, McGahn, what are we thinking?
This is something that really was sort of a shock. Apparently, McGahn did not know that he was going to be making this announcement via Twitter. This was something that followed an Axios report, pretty much making the rounds through D.C., setting up this decision. And interestingly enough, it was one that was based on anonymous report about an hour before the president tweeted, "Don't trust anonymous stories," before confirming one of his own.
Right.
So,
could it have been he was the anonymous source?
I'm sure it was. I mean, the way that it was written, it was very kind to Don McGahn, but I don't know that offhand, and even if I did, I'm not going to burn anybody else's source. But the White House prior to this were trying to play it down, saying that there wasn't going to be any shakeup. They seemed just as surprised as others, as did members of Congress, including Chuck Grassley, who is the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who tweeted pretty much around the same time as the president that if these reports were true, he would hope that he would reconsider. As it stands now, it looks like it's a done deal. It looks like McGahn's going to be leaving after the midterm elections or after the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh. Either way, sometime in the fall, which is going to set up some pretty big questions for whoever's going to fill his seat, which, the safe money is now on Emmett Flood, who was a Clinton appointee and his legal team, a Bush official, and somebody who's, viewed as much more of a pit bull than Don McGahn, who, really ended up irking the president in his final days.
Yeah, I mean, does this all come back to the fact that he worked with the Mueller investigation and the number of hours, which seemed excessive, some 30-plus hours he provided for Mueller? Do you think that is really the undercurrent of all this?
I don't think you can divorce that from the developments today. I think, it's pretty clear that Don McGahn was not really enthused with a lot of the decisions that the president was making, was probably not going to be sticking that long anyways, but you can't have a report that says that he met with Mueller's team for more than 30 hours and that he was pretty much establishing himself as trying to, cover himself and push back against the president, trying to put it on him without having that irk the president himself. So I think, anything that moves forward with that, you have to keep that in mind. I think that either the straw that broke the camel's back or, the cause itself.
Interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what plays out because I immediately expect Sessions to go. As you know, this week, last week and into this week, you had Lindsey Graham basically setting the table for Sessions to be fired. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays itself out. And I would have to think that, and I'm hoping that Mueller's reading the tea leaves and going, let's step this up just a little bit.
And it's also going to raise some pretty serious questions over who the president's going to be moving forward with. We know that the president has very publicly said that he wants somebody who will pretty much protect him, who will be his Bobby Kennedy or, other sort of White House pit bull who will help keep things in line. Something that is going against the modern version of the Attorney General. That's a view that he had for the White House counsel as well, pretty much a misunderstanding over whether or not the counsel is serving as his personal attorney or representing the presidency itself. And now that we know what the president is looking for, that is going to be a significant taint on anybody who puts forward and will certainly raise some concern. Last time around with Christopher Wray, they really broke their back to try to get the point across that, this is not going to be somebody who's going to be subservient, and it's going to be harder this time around since we just know how frustrated and how eager to lash out at Jeff Sessions the president was, and also from the fact that, the president has a pretty narrow base of lawyers he trusts. We know that he continually goes with Rudy Giuliani or turns to Chris Christie or turns to Alan Dershowitz. And, with the appetite for the president to have big names that he's seen on TV before serving in important roles, that's going to add yet another, level of drama to this. So
that would be just pure gold.
Cool ahead prevail, but it doesn't look likely.
Attorney General Rudy Giuliani, would that not just be pure gold?
I mean, Rudy Giuliani was very openly aiming for the position of Secretary of State before Trump was inaugurated. Something that most people don't usually do when they're seeking a cabinet position. You don't usually go in public and say, I want this job and I would be great at it. And then also that this is not a job where, I would imagine that I would be traveling very much, and I'm planning on doing most of it in Washington, D.C., which is kind of the equivalent of just saying, hey, hire me, but I'm going to
mail it in.
I also like the first 6 weeks off. So I think that shot him in the foot, but I think, given how Giuliani's pretty much expressed his interest in serving in a greater role previously, I don't think he can really rule it out, which is hard. I don't think he would, stand a chance of being confirmed, but I think that's probably going to be part of the conversation that we're inevitably going to be hearing.
Now, does the White House counsel have to be confirmed, or is that an appointed position?
That's just an appointed position.
Yeah, because I'm thinking of who's going to take that job, and I don't know. I don't know that I know I wouldn't, because it seems like it'd be nothing but a headache having to deal with him. But we'll see. We'll see how this fleshes itself out. Let's move along. Florida, not going to monkey things up, I guess, huh?
Yeah, this got weird really quickly. Last night was a primary, and that set the stage for what was going to be a very highly watched campaign. Due to the fact that Ron DeSantis is a Trump loyalist to the extreme, to the point that he cut a campaign ad where he was, reading Donald Trump speeches to his daughter and just going through all these theatrical steps to align himself with the president. And then Andrew Gillum, who is a much more progressive-leaning icon at this point, somebody who's very favored with the Bernie Sanders wing of the party. And this was going to speak volumes about the direction for, Florida and the rest of the country. And it got nasty really quick. During an appearance on America's News desk on Fox News, we saw Ron DeSantis using some very troubling language, praising Andrew Gillum for being articulate, which is a dog whistle in itself.
He speaks so well.
Pardon?
He speaks so well.
Yeah.
It's like they used to do to Colin Powell. He speaks so well. I mean, Chris Rock does a great bit on that.
I mean, that was something that we saw back in 2008 as well with, Harry Reid describing Obama. But, there's a pretty big difference when you have someone who's of a much different age and era than, Ron DeSantis, who is only really 39 at this point, should certainly know much, much better. And then in addition to the articulate thing, in the video that's been making the rounds all day, he said that basically Florida voters are at risk of monkeying it up in terms of the state's economy, something that even Fox News appeared to castigate him on not long after the interview ended. They came out and said that this is not language that we approve of and that the candidate has clarified it, so we urge you to look that out, which I guess to a large extent kind of shows how this was seen as a gaffe in real time and shows that the gravity of it is being appreciated.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, I got a ton of emails here already, of the justification. Oh, he says that all the time. It wasn't really meant as anything bad. He says it all the time.
Yeah, and, the campaign came out and said that, this was not something that was intended to be racist, that this is an absurd claim coming from those who, see it in that light. But, this is something that can really hurt a statewide race. If we flash back to 2006 in Virginia with Jim Webb and George Allen used the
macaca.
A really esoteric slur that, one just wasn't really part of the usual lexicon.
And something that you really have to look up. Because I still don't even know what it means.
Yeah, that's true, right?
I never actually, I know it's a slur. I just don't know what kind or who or why. It's just one of those things where you really had to know and be specific to use that word, and someone had to whisper it in his ear.
Which, George Allen, there were a lot of rumors about just sheerly racist stuff from his gubernatorial days that were making the rounds during that race.
Yeah.
Him using a noose in his office as a decorative piece and stuff like that. So maybe he was just very well versed in his prejudice. But either way, that derailed that race. That became a big, a big element in a year with a Republican president and a, insurgent Democratic Party that were running a lot of, centrist candidates and whatnot. So it's not outside of the realm of possibilities to, see this make a splash.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an ugly race down there, one way or the other. I just see bad things coming on. And finally, evidently, the Trump administration did a fantastic job in Puerto Rico. In fact, the president was down there throwing out paper towels. Hey, paper towels. Remember that?
Yeah, that was a thing that happened in one of the, more surreal moments of the early Trump presidency. But yeah, those were his own words today, saying that it was a fantastic job when he was asked about Puerto Rico in the Roosevelt Room of the White House. This is coming one day after a commissioned study from Puerto Rico found that the official death toll was not 64, but with those who died in the aftermath and the struggles of Puerto Rico in the wake of Hurricane Maria was now close to about 3,000. Anything, or it says a development that should have, certainly given the White House pause, should have at least changed the tone and maybe given a usual president an opportunity to add a human dimension to it. But nevertheless, he is, saying not just that the federal government did a, fantastic job and spent a lot of money, but also seemed to try to put the blame on Puerto Rico itself, claiming falsely that their power plant was already down before the storm and shut off, which just was not the case. So just a baffling response for some pretty horrendous news. After the White House had actually tried to massage it as well, giving a more restrained statement through the White House press secretary, one that didn't use the word fantastic, I believe, and one that also really stressed the human element of this and pledging to take care of Puerto Rico moving forward with the next hurricane season and continue the aid effort. And that was quickly undone with the president's remarks yet again.
Yeah, heck of a job there, Orange Tanny.
That was the thing. Heck of a job, Brownie. Yeah, that was something that, in any normal year would have, been one of those things that we just remember forever. But given the sheer level of insanity, this is going to be one of those things that sadly, I guess, just kind of falls
just
through the
goes
cracks.
by. Because look, this is his MO. Regardless of what actually happens, it's the best ever. We did the best ever. We're fantastic. We're tremendous. We're terrific. And the reality be damned. It's all about the PR. It's about the spin. And so I'm not at all surprised that he probably actually believes they did a fantastic job.
Yeah, and this is something that, the White House is a bubble. Dick Cheney was saying for a long time that, he didn't believe that the Bush administration got enough credit for their job in Hurricane Katrina. That's what he was telling people off record for a good number of years. But, you know, at a certain point, a creeping level of awareness came in, and they realized that they could have certainly handled it better, at least in their public messaging for it.
Yeah.
That's not coming to the White House. That's not coming from Trump, and that's a cause for alarm.
Absolutely. Justin, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much for the update.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Justin Duckham, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show for working people.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1996. That was the day the workers at the Lusty Lady Strip Club in San Francisco made their final push to make their case for the right to join a union. They made history by winning the union vote 57-15. SEIU Local 790 led the historic campaign. What started the union drive was the windows at the private booths where the ladies performed. The windows had one-way glass. That meant patrons could look in, but performers could not see out. They worried that the men could videotape them or take photographs without their permission. When management refused to change the windows, the women started talking union. Soon, other workplace issues arose as the women furthered their union discussion. One woman recalled, "We started to discuss other problems at work, like being forced to come in when you were sick." She went on, "Our first thought was to organize a petition, but we were really concerned about individual dancers being scapegoated and fired because that happened on a regular basis." Another participant in the union drew on her personal background as a reason for getting involved. She noted, "I had been raised to support union efforts and the workers' cause. I hadn't ever worked at a place where there was any sort of struggle to be a part of." The women ran a successful campaign to unionize. Despite winning the vote, management dragged its feet in negotiating their first contract. The women went on strike, and management locked them out. Few men dared to cross the picket line to enter the club. And within a few days, management capitulated and returned to the bargaining table where the women signed their first contract.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
So real quick, a couple of quick emails. Sharon points out that macaca is a slur exactly like Desantis is. It's a female monkey, and in not a good way. And I didn't know that. Thank you, Sharon. Thanks for pointing that out. Also, John sent an email. Said, "You do realize that Puerto Rico was hit by a hurricane, right?" He said, "I think President Trump did everything he could do." Really? How cute. He said, "We sent things and they were stranded on the docks because union workers were striking for higher wages." Fox News viewer, right? I'll guarantee it. While their neighbors were dying. "I know you won't touch this because you're in their pocket. Trump is making America great again." Yeah. You know what? I almost don't even think it's worth a response, but just so you know, that whole the truck drivers were all on strike nonsense was total and complete BS. It was completely made up. The reason that they couldn't get things delivered is because the roads were all destroyed and the wires were all down. You literally couldn't pass. So you had to send in a construction crew first to clear the way through. Should have done that first. But again, planning details, something the administration, a little lacking on. Or a lot lacking on. But hey, you know what I did enjoy? How he put 3 boxes into a truck and thought that was full. And the lottery of the paper towels, perfect. Did everything he could possibly do. Yep, everything. Jeez, crazy. Crazy stuff. Quick break. Right back with hour 2. Stick around.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
Have you noticed that Donald Trump constantly prefaces his outlandish lies with such phrases as, to be honest with you, to tell the truth, and believe me? Why? Because, like a snake oil salesman, he constantly needs to convince himself that he's speaking the truth in order to perform his next lie convincingly. The show must go on and on. In fact, he already ranks as the lyingest president in U.S. history, and that includes Nixon. Trump's biggest whopper is that he's an honest-to-God populist, standing up for America's hard-hit middle class against Wall Street, corporate lobbyists, and moneyed elites. This prevarication has duped many working stiffs into thinking he's their champion. The huckster doubled down on this lie in his inaugural address last year, pompously declaring, "The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer." That's why a new straight-talking pamphlet by the watchdog group Public Citizen is so important. It exposes the people's champion as a rank fraud who is pushed from day one to further enrich and empower corporate elites he had denounced as a candidate. Public Citizen's report documents with concise, easy-to-grasp specifics how Trump, the faux populist, has systematically sold out the working families whose votes he cynically swiped, handing our government to a kakistocracy of corporate plutocrats. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's not merely that he's an irredeemable liar, but that Trump himself is a lie. The Public Citizen expose is titled, "Forgetting the Forgotten, 101 Ways Donald Trump Has Betrayed the Middle Class," and it drives the stake of truth through the heart of his populist pretensions. Don't just read it. Use it like a Thomas Paine pamphlet to spread the truth. To download a free copy, go to corporatepresidency.org/forgotten.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Your working class radio experience, where hard
common sense and rational thoughts
are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard to make a left, rain shed a farm red. My father son left to carry on, blue denim had his vein. Oh, he's a working class man.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So remember, the 2016 campaign? You had the Donald running around saying he was going to be the champion of working class wages. He was going to be the guy who brought back the middle class, the reward for work, that old thing, that work hard, play by the rules, get ahead stuff. Well, doesn't look like it's working out that way. In fact, it looks like what we already knew back then, and I've been saying all along that the wealthy and the powerful, well, they would become much more so, and the rest of us, well, not so much. And here to share some thoughts on the direction of corporate profits and wages and the economy and all that, I've asked Andrew Schwartz to come talk with us. He's a policy analyst over at the Center for American Progress's economic policy team. Andrew, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, great to be with you.
So we were told this, weren't we? It was going to be great. We were all going to, I remember here in Harrisburg, Trump standing in front of a big truck, saying we're going to get $4,000 in our paycheck, and it's going to be great. And I'm still waiting for my Trump prize.
Yeah, that has not been borne out in the data thus far, and unfortunately, should the trends continue, I don't think we're going to see that anytime in the future either.
So no Trump prize. Am I getting no Trump prize? Come on, something. Got to give me something.
I guess the best I can give you right now, we've got some pretty huge increases in corporate profits the first quarter, and we got some second quarter data just today, and we see that from the second quarter from 2017 to 2018, corporate profits are up 7.7%.
And what about wages? What about, because we're told, when the economy heats up and, we give them all the money at the top, something's got to trickle down to us, right?
So we're seeing a bit of wage growth. Unfortunately, it's almost entirely been mitigated by inflation, which is saying more about the lack of wage growth than it is about a modest amount of inflation that we're seeing.
So working harder, working longer, and working for less.
Yeah, that's basically right.
So are we getting this? I mean, because the hope is that people, I go back to 2016, and I met a lot of Trump supporters who were angry. They were ticked off. Jobs were leaving the country, had left the country. Their industries were wiped out. They're working crummy jobs, no health care, no pension. They've got all of these real world struggles, and their anger is real. Has he done to this point anything to make that any better?
It's hard to point to anything that he's done broadly. I mean, we're seeing generic economic growth across the country, but that growth is not making it to workers. In fact, we're seeing as a share of GDP, labor gets about 60, accounts for about 60% of that. Back in say 1970, around the peak, it was up at 66%. So again, while we're seeing the economy grow, it's the people at the top who own all the capital that are seeing that growth, and most of everybody else who relies on their labor to earn wages and a paycheck just don't see things getting a whole lot better.
And again, there are, in my view, there are policies that could help with this. But I look at what the Trump administration is doing. I look at all of the attacks on the regulatory bodies that oversee, minimum wage laws and maximum hour laws and wage theft laws and, safety laws and all of these things. And it seems like all of that's going in the wrong direction. And it seems like the deregulation that they're doing is, making wage theft great again, making cheating great again, all of those things that would turn us in the wrong direction. So it just seems to me like the ship is completely backwards.
Yeah, I'd say that's right. You mentioned all those attacks on workers and safety protections and environmental protections and all those things that do make things America the country that it is, that we can live in a safe and clean environment. All those are being rolled back, and that's going to allow corporations potentially to cut some corners and make some more profits. But as we've seen with these tax cuts, these increased profits are not making their way to workers.
I mean, any surprise there? I mean, look, it seems like every time we pursue this fool's errand of saying, we just need to give a little bit more to the very wealthy, and they'll invest. Trust us. They'll invest in new jobs here, and those jobs are going to be good jobs, and they're going to pay really outstanding wages because the wealthy they're benevolent, and they believe in giving things, and they believe in charity, and they believe in all that stuff. They're going to create jobs without demand. It's going to be great. It's going to be great, Andrew.
Yeah, well, I'd say one sector of the economy where we're seeing some charity is in the financial sector. In fact, banks so far this year have seen $13 billion in tax cuts, so that's boosted their profits to a record $60 billion in the second quarter. And on top of that, they got some of the provisions in Dodd-Frank that we enacted after the financial crisis. They got some of those rolled back because apparently business is not good enough for on Wall Street.
And every day I hear Trump say how wonderful, how great the economy is. It's incredible to me. So the question I keep coming back to, when do we learn the lesson? I mean, we've been having the football pulled away from us for 30 some years now. You go back to the Reagan era. When do we go, okay, this isn't working? Maybe we should be going backwards, maybe to the good socialist president Dwight David Eisenhower's era. Maybe we need to start raising taxes on the very wealthy because they're not using the money all that well for society, helping themselves. As I'm okay with that to a certain extent, but for the most part, society, we're getting screwed and we're paying for it.
Yeah, and I think fortunately, we're kind of, I guess it's unfortunate we're reaching kind of desperate times, but it's leading to some some new thinking. And I guess one example I would point to in the past couple of weeks, Senator Elizabeth Warren had an Accountable Capitalism Act, and she was kind of making the rounds, and she would say, I believe in markets, but the problem with markets right now is they're not set up for workers to do well. They're set up for corporations to do well. And so one thing she's got this bill out that what it would do is require a corporate charter and at the federal level, and it would mandate that corporations above a certain size be responsible not just to their shareholders but stakeholders. So that includes the community, the workers, the environment, and those kinds of things. And if they don't live up to those responsibilities, the federal government can take that corporate charter away from them.
Yeah, but she didn't just dream that up. I mean, that comes from the founding of the country.
Yeah, definitely. I think these are kind of some old ideas getting some new life, and I think now we're reaching a time where the old ways of thinking that the country was founded on back in the New Deal era, things we've gotten kind of so twisted in our thinking where those ideas that really founded the basis of what became the modern economy for much of the 20th century, have become radical by today's thinking. And so I think, one thing that's intriguing to me about this is we're really getting back to those ideas of how to create an equitable economy for all workers.
Well, I mean, it goes back to, I had a friend who was an old Hungarian guy. He came over on the boat years and years ago, and he used to ask the question all the time, do we live to work or work to live? And, and that was his mindset. I mean, and he was a workaholic because it was in his mind that he was put on this planet to work. That's all he ever did. And he would keep asking that question. And I go, well, the answer because you're doing it. And I guess we're going back to the days where, working people are just put on this planet to serve the very wealthy and continue to work and sacrifice and struggle because there's pie in the sky.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. And I keep coming back to the 2018 election because all of the things that this administration has done, all of the moves forward that the Republicans have attempted to do seem to be taking us all back. All of the attacks on organized labor, all of the attacks on safety, all of the attacks on workers' rights. And you look at the forced mandatory arbitration nonsense that came out of the court. So much of this stuff. And I'm hoping that people are paying attention or can, because it just seems like we're just being bombarded from every direction.
Yeah, it definitely does seem like that. And, I think your point is right that, looking at this election, it's the opportunity if people don't like what they're seeing in Washington from Congress and from this administration, I think it's an opportunity they have to start turning the ship in a different direction.
I mean, you're the economic expert here. Tell me, is it possible to have the kind of economy we want, where people, work hard, play by the rules, get ahead? You have a reasonable living with good health care that you don't have to worry about going bankrupt over if you get sick, and also having a little bit of retirement security at the end of the road. Is that too much to ask?
I think it's definitely possible. It's going to require, at the federal, state, and local levels, changing the policies that we have in place and, rethinking what it means to, work and earn a living wage.
Yeah, we've got definitely scary times, considering a lot of economists that I've been reading lately are saying, prepare yourself for 2020 because it could be another downturn.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the other thing is, by historical standards, this economy at a macro national level is doing well, and I kind of really concerns me to think about what could happen should the next recession arrive. And we've kind of used a lot of our policy tools to cut taxes for the rich and corporations, and kind of have hamstrung ourselves while we had the opportunity to really build things up. The large economy at a national level is doing well.
No, it's amazing to me because, we're told Trump's telling us the economy's never been better. It's great. Yet they passed that massive stimulus tax cut because we're told, tax cuts stimulate the economy. But we needed that huge tax cut to stimulate the economy even more. It's twisted, it's bizarre, but hey, we're buying it. We're buying it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, and I think we're definitely seeing the GDP growth now, and I think a lot of it is boosted up by the tax cuts, by the kind of exports on steroids ahead of these potential tariffs, and I think it's a little bit of a sugar high, and so I think expecting in the quarters ahead, we probably won't see this robust GDP growth that we've seen recently, and it's probably going to be back down to normal and what we've seen over the past through much of the Obama administration as well.
That's probably the best way I've heard it put. It's a sugar high. I mean, that is actually a pretty good way of putting it, because that's exactly what it is. And what happens when we crash? Well, the working people of this country, they're the ones who suffer, as we always do. Sad stuff. Andrew, I appreciate the time, the thoughts. Keep up the great work you guys are doing over at the Center for American Progress.
All right. Thanks for having me, Rick.
Thanks so much. Andrew Schwartz, policy analyst there with the Center for American Progress's economic policy team. Quick break, right back. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Common sense and rational thought
are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard. Arrangements, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Profit billions off our backs, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money. We will talk for respect.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That's the day 2,500 steelworkers at the Pressed Steel Car Company near McKees Rock, Pennsylvania, walked off the job. It was the second walkout in 2 weeks. Workers effectively shut down production of armor plate for the Navy, shell forgings for the Army, and railroad cars used to transport military material. The company had gone back on promises of holding a collective bargaining election. Steelworkers Organizing Committee Sub-Regional Director Abe Martin told the Pittsburgh Press that while the union had not called the strike, workers had, quote, walked out themselves because they are fed up with the company's discrimination against them. SWAC had been trying to organize the plant for years, but the company had engineered an election for a so-called independent union 18 months earlier when the complex was only operating at half capacity. Workers walked out at the beginning of the month and ended their strike on the guarantee that negotiations for a new election would begin. But when they returned, they found that some were stripped of their seniority while others were forcefully transferred to new departments. The day before, machine shop workers on the afternoon shift were fed up and dropped their tools. Word spread throughout the evening, and by early morning, picket lines were solid and production had come to a complete standstill. When the company tried to force reopening of the plant after Labor Day, 1,500 workers formed picket lines at the gate to stop scabbing. They returned to work 10 days later in compliance with a request by the National Defense Mediation Board. The NLRB rejected SWAC's election petition 2 months later, but SWAC persisted and won exclusive bargaining rights the following June. So here's some good, this is good nonsense. NBC News and Gen Forward have a new survey out. The headline, Millennials Delusioned About Midterm Elections. And look, you look at some of this stuff and you go, what exactly is the point of this survey? But they go ahead and they say that they ask, millennials who they're going to vote for, who they're favorable, who they're unfavorable. And they found, 6 in 10 millennials consistently express an unfavorable view of Republicans. Less than 3 in 10 have favorable views. Yeah, we know that because, look, the millennial generation, they're the ones that the Republicans are screwing just to death. There aren't any jobs for them to grab, saddled with a lifetime of student loan debt, non-dischargeable, by the way, and they're giving away the future by giving away massive tax breaks. And when the next economic collapse happens, and understand, a lot of economists are saying, hold on, 2020's coming. Get ready, because it's going to be worse than probably 2008 was, because we won't have the ability to respond in the same way. Because guess what? We gave the money away. And all of those wonderful gains that we see in our 401k, and I get it too. You know, every month the statement comes and I go, oh, wow, I made a couple extra bucks here. How long is that going to be? I remember that before the 2007 downturn that led to the 2008 collapse. I was going, wow, things are going pretty good. That's what happens on Wall Street. And the thing that gets me is it's always the working people who end up getting screwed, because the really smart people, they bailed long before. The institutional money never loses. It's like any gambling. The house never loses. It's the suckers who have the 401ks and the retirement plans that aren't as responsive. We're the ones who got screwed. Because my 401k in 2009 was more like a 200.5, about half. So, you know, do what you have to do with that information. Also, they point out in the NBC News Gen Forward survey that a plurality of millennials have consistently said that they're going to vote for Democrats in the 2018 congressional elections. Around a quarter have said they're going to vote for Republicans, and somewhere around a quarter have said they don't plan to vote for either party or not sure what they're going to do. But look, you know, this is where the Democrats need to come forward with a real plan, with an idea of how they're going to make people's lives better. And, you know, I was just reading some of the debate notes from Cynthia Nixon and Andrew Cuomo in New York. And, you know, depending on who you're looking at, Cynthia Nixon slammed him on a number of points and scored, I think, a lot of points with progressives and liberals, because Cuomo actually tried to paint her as a corporate Democrat. A guy with a massive war chest that comes from Wall Street. And look, I don't have a dog in that fight. At this point, there are bigger fish to fry. But I did find it very interesting that Cuomo came out and said that teachers' strikes would hurt, are anti-education. I do find that very interesting because that's a very, right-wing view. So there is that. Now, in the Senate, Tammy Baldwin is doing something I think is smart. And this is what Democrats need to do a lot more of. It's, talking about, hey, how are we going to make sure that people, that their lives do get better? One of the things that Trump has done with the ACA is they've got these junk healthcare plans again. They used to call them mini plans back before the ACA. You saw a lot of low-wage employers offer these. They maybe you got one doctor visit a year. They were really high-cost, catastrophic plans more than anything. To where if you got cancer, they'd pay something, or you had a heart attack, they'd pay something. But if you broke your ankle or something, good luck. These are back. We're making crap healthcare great again. And what these are doing is they don't cover pre-existing conditions either. What Tammy Baldwin is trying to do is using the Congressional Review Act to go and maneuver a way to make sure that those expanded junk insurance plans actually cover pre-existing conditions. And I've yet to find anybody who can make a cogent argument to me on why we should allow all kinds of people to buy insurance plans that don't cover anything. Because, I actually, there was a guy I worked with, about 6 months ago who was selling, this kind of this kind of insurance. You know, they knew this was coming and they were prepping people. You can get this and it's really dirt cheap. You know, it was like like $80, $100 a month. And I'm going, for $80 or $100 a month, what does it cover? He goes, I don't know, but it's cheap. And I'm going, what? You're selling insurance? And this is the problem. This is the problem with insurance. It shouldn't be in the hands of some dolt who go, well, it's cheap, without knowing what it covers. Because, you know, I sat down and I looked at all the different plans, and I'm picking and I'm ripping apart stuff, and I'm trying to read all of this stuff to make sure that, you know, if something does happen, we're actually going to be covered and we're going to actually do okay and not end up homeless or bankrupt or worse. And this is a conversation that, you know, I'm hoping Democrats really hammer on, because the Republicans have had no ideas, not even their bad ideas from the past. Have you heard a Republican bring up health savings accounts recently? No. That was one of the ideas that aren't not terribly horrible. Now, understand, they're a huge tax boom for the very wealthy. They're, you know, a way to stash money away, and you know, it's a tax dodge, understand. But if you could figure out a way to make sure that working class people had access to a health savings accounts where money actually went into it, you know, maybe saying, like, look, we're going to put $3,000 into everybody's health savings accounts. That might actually build something over time. There was actually a conservative idea at birth, giving someone $10,000 to put into a health savings account just to let it accrue interest. And I know there's the conservative out there going, well, you're just giving stuff away. Yeah, it's called a safety net. And we used to have one, a really pretty good one, until we gave the tax base away. Until we told billionaires that, you know, you can accumulate as much as you want, and none needs to come back. And it comes back to that question: what's the economy for? Is the economy just to make a handful of super rich people? Or is it to create opportunities? Is it to create a safety net below everybody so that we all do better when we all do better? And it's more than just a slogan. So it's infuriating to me to see the kind of no ideas that the Republicans have and Democrats not taking advantage of it. The only thing that they can do, and Cynthia Nixon tonight brought up, I guess, a bunch of those. You know, college tuition and criminal justice reform and a lot of that stuff. To me, making people's lives better. And all she's being hammered for on it is, well, how are you going to pay for it, honey? How are you going to do that? You do it like they did during the Eisenhower years. You tax the rich people. 92% during the Eisenhower years. So for all you good socialist Republicans, that was your boy, 92% back then. If you made $1.6 million in today's dollars back then, they taxed that dollar over $1.6 million at 92%. Now, nobody paid that. Nobody paid anywhere near that, because they used the money in society to build schools and hospitals and things that were charitable and things that benefited the community. They added a wing under the community hospital, not the for-profit hospital, the community hospital. We've been duped. We've been screwed. And you know what? We did it knowingly. It's nuts. Just nuts. Maybe we wake up. Maybe some of the blinders and the trolls in the chat room, maybe their eyes open, or maybe not. Maybe too far gone. And it's always been my view, you let the fives go. There are some that, you know, should be just off the ship. You just let them go. Let them go and leave them quietly. Seems that simple to me. We'll take a quick break. Right back after this with Denisha Jones. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show.
I got no time for living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Torrential rain has been relentless for nearly 5 days, dousing the Big Island with more than 51 inches.
Hawaii dodges a direct hit from record-breaking Hurricane Lane, but receives a warning about global warming. Australia's Conservative Prime Minister ousted over climate policies. Plus,
facts of global warming demand our urgent attention, especially in Washington.
The complicated climate legacy of Senator John McCain.
All of those complications and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
In the years ahead, we're likely to see reduced water supplies, more forest fires, changes in crop production, more heat waves, and a greater intensity in storms.
Wow, John McCain, 10 years ago. Too bad his colleagues didn't pay attention. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I think we have good news, sort of, concerning Hurricane Lane and Hawaii.
Well, it's good news and maybe a little bad news as well. Hawaii did dodge a direct hit over the weekend from now Tropical Storm Lane, which is now tracking back out to sea after skirting the islands and dumping historic levels of rain that triggered widespread flooding across the island chain. Many high water rescues, but thankfully no reported deaths. Lane delivered more than 51 inches of rain. That is more than 4 feet, catapulting it into the record books as the third highest rainfall total for a tropical storm or hurricane in the United States since record keeping began nearly 70 years ago.
Wow.
And it hit 1 year to the day after Hurricane Harvey broke the all-time high rainfall record for the U.S.
Well, the hits keep on coming.
Yes, having 2 of the top 3 all-time most extreme rainstorms from hurricanes occurring in just the past 2 years is consistent with what scientists expect from a warming climate. Hurricane Lane also brought a warning for Hawaii. Lane was only the second Category 5 storm in recorded history to pass so near to the state, but a recent study from MIT and the University of Colorado Boulder projects that due to global warming increasing ocean temperatures, the most intense tropical storms near Hawaii are now predicted to increase in frequency by about 15% per decade. But the researchers also said, quote, "We can cut that increase roughly in half by reducing our fossil fuel emissions."
But as long as we don't reduce our fossil fuel emissions, the oceans will continue to warm, these storms will continue to get more frequent, and, most notably, more intense.
Indeed, they will. Reducing emissions will not be happening anytime soon in Australia.
Sorry, mate.
That's the world's biggest coal exporter. Conservative Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull was ousted from office on Friday by his right-wing climate science denier members of his own party after he attempted to set modest targets for reducing the nation's carbon emissions.
Well, that'll teach him.
Former Liberal Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, in a scathing editorial in the Sydney Morning Herald, however, also blamed Australian media, specifically Rupert Murdoch, owner of Sky News in the UK and Australia and Fox News Channel here in the US. He accused Rupert Murdoch of using his control of Australian media to drum Turnbull out of office and block any action on climate change, calling Murdoch, quote, "a cancer eating at the heart of Australian democracy."
So it's not just Americans being played for suckers by Rupert Murdoch.
Nope. Australia is also fighting an outbreak of winter wildfires, and the province of New South Wales, which supplies a quarter of Australia's agricultural output, is officially in 100% drought amid the deepest drought in more than 50 years.
So all of these things, worsening storms, worsening wildfires, worsening droughts, were all things that John McCain, the 2008 Republican presidential candidate, warned us about 10 years ago before forgetting all about it.
Exactly. That brings us to Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona, who passed away over the weekend. Whatever you think of his complicated legacy, we just want to note for the record that Senator McCain was the last Republican leader to push for U.S. action on climate change. In 2003 and 2005, McCain sponsored groundbreaking national cap-and-trade legislation. In 2008, as the Republican presidential nominee, McCain laid out a detailed cap-and-trade policy to curb carbon emissions and fight climate change.
The facts of global warming demand our urgent attention, especially in Washington. Good stewardship prudence and simple common sense demand that we act to meet the challenge and act quickly.
However, after he lost the 2008 election to President Barack Obama, McCain abandoned his climate leadership role and in 2010 refused to support new cap-and-trade climate legislation in the Senate. So, literally, 2008 was the last time the Republican Party supported any real action to curb climate change.
Even John McCain's vice presidential nominee, Sarah Palin, wanted to do something about climate change as well.
How quickly things change.
Those were the days. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Those were the days, my friend. We thought they'd never end. We'd sing and dance forever and a day.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. So some interesting information coming out of Seattle as teachers there and public school workers have authorized a strike that could happen on September 1st, the first day of school in those districts. And, again, it brings back to this, what we saw at the end of last year, the organizing of teachers to stand up, not just for better wages and hours, but for better conditions, but for better opportunities for their students, for better initiatives to stand up for public education, especially when you've got someone like billionaire Betsy running the Department of Education. And here to share some thoughts on what we should be pursuing and what our Secretary of Education should be focused on. I've asked Denisha Jones to come talk with us. She's one of the board of directors with the Badass Teachers Association. Denisha, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So I'm looking at this situation in Seattle, and here we are, more teachers stepping up, speaking out, and ready to defend their profession.
Yeah, it's definitely getting close. I have a couple educator friends who are out there, and they're giving us the update that negotiations aren't going the way they want, and they're holding firm and they're prepared, if need be, to strike. We saw it happen in Kentucky, and we saw it happen in Arizona and other places. And teachers are just the working conditions of the teacher is the learning condition of your child. You should want better for your child's teacher or for anyone's teacher, because it affects how well they do their job, and we should all want better for them. And it seems like the only thing that works these days is to strike, is to refuse to go to work until, they're willing to engage you on a real level, and not just make, teachers have been promising raises and lower class sizes, but they never get them, but now all of a sudden now we got money to buy guns though. So there's hope, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, billionaire Betsy wants to make sure that all of the teachers are armed and there's a gun on the wall and all of that. And because, hey, it's going to make those kids listen a little bit better.
I mean, teachers go out, spend $300 to $500 out of their pocket just to start the school year and make sure that they have everything they need. But somehow schools that can't afford a nurse 5 days a week or can't afford a librarian 5 days a week somehow are going to have money for to arm teachers. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. And, I work in higher education, and after the last school shooting, I just said, can you imagine I have to prepare people to become teachers? So how to teach students, how to manage their behavior, how to work with parents, how to do this. And now how to, shoot a gun to protect your students. Like, that's not something that, I can wrap my mind around having to protect them for. And it just seems it's going a little sideways, that that's the best we can come up with to deal with what's happening.
I mean, as someone who works at the college level, are you guys doing firearms training? I mean, is that part of the curriculum now to become a teacher in this country?
Absolutely not. It's bad enough when we have to go through active shooter training ourselves. I haven't had to do it at my school now, but at my previous school we did, right? I live in Washington, D.C. It happens. You get, shooters in the area. So that's the kind of, mindset you have to go on, and that's what to do if your classroom is attacked or you're in the office. And so I couldn't imagine then taking it one step level, and it's like, okay, here's how you line up a bunch of first graders, and by the way, here's how you teach them, to not let you accidentally shoot them or something like that.
It's crazy.
I don't think people are really thinking it through, what might go wrong, all the things that might go wrong if teachers are armed, you know.
Well, they have this premise that the good guy with the gun is going to make things right. And without understanding that, you know, even trained professionals in those situations, and we saw this during the Parkland shooting, even they didn't react as you would imagine or you would fantasize that one would.
Yeah, and you can just imagine when the police show up that they can immediately discern that this guy with a gun is obviously good and this guy with a gun is obviously bad. I think, you know, they're going to shoot first and try and discern that later, because you really don't know when you show up on a chaotic scene like that who's the person with the gun. I mean, and we have an incidence of, you know, people losing their lives for not doing anything wrong, really. And can you imagine just putting a teacher in that position? You know, teachers make a lot of decisions in the day, right? They say, you know, teachers will make a ton. And so imagine having to make a split decision about whether this kid is doing something or not. And you know, the response is that you're armed with a gun, and that's how you're responding to a child. I mean, there's just so much that could go wrong. And I don't think people have really thought that through. You always think in the hindsight, oh, I'll be heroic. If that was me, I would do all this. But, you know, you don't know how you're going to act. Like we saw in Parkland, that the one guy with a gun couldn't even respond. So it's really sad to think that teachers are going to be able to make that kind of decision, and should have to make that kind of decision.
Yeah, and look, I had one teacher explain to me that you know they got into the profession because they love kids, and now you're training me to kill one of these people that I love.
Yeah.
And he's like, I just couldn't do it. Just cannot do it. Or heaven forbid, there's an accident and little Susie gets capped in the front row. You know, how do you tell their parents that? But, you know, I did want to ask you, because, you know, we talked about all of the organizing that's been going on, and, you know, what's fascinating to me is it's about more than just wages. It's about more than just benefits. It's about the profession. And this is why I think teachers are so important and so selfless. It's about, you know, rethinking education as a whole and defending public education.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen for a long time public education, as well as many other public goods, are under attack, right? The forces of privatization, they see a lot of money to be made. I mean, teachers are not just asking for more pay, they're asking for less standardized tests that take up the entire curriculum and turn children into data points. They're worried about data. They're worried about using programs like Google Classroom, and where is all this information going, and how is it being stored, and who's in charge of it, and what happens if it gets breached, right? They're worried about discipline. They don't want to have zero tolerance policies that force children to be suspended, you know, for misbehaving, and don't give teachers other options. They want things like restorative justice. They want smaller class size because it improves learning, right? They want authentic assessments and teachers being able to do what we train them to do and not have to rely on standardized curriculum and standardized assessments. So it's a whole mix of things that they're really asking for these days. But in the end, they all benefit making, like you said, making public education better. I mean, public education should change and adapt. The society's changed and adapt, but you got to let the professionals lead that, right? And we're not letting that. We're letting everybody who's not an expert in education come in and kind of lead the revolution. So teachers are trying to take that back. They're trying to say, look, you know, you trust us to educate our child, trust us, and we tell you these are the things that'll make our job a lot better.
I mean, look, Betsy DeVos, who I don't even know that has ever been in a public school, is the one in charge of it. You can't get and maybe this is just me being hyperbolic, but I don't think you can get someone much dumber to lead something that is so important as education.
Not even dumb, but someone who doesn't believe in it. You know, when I first heard her name, when I first heard that she was the one that they were nominating for Secretary of Education, I remember reading an article about the DeVos family and how they really were against the whole idea of public education. And I was like, wow, when you talk about they want to destroy public education, the they was the DeVos family. And here they are being put in charge of public education. So, you know, it's an institution you don't believe in. You don't think society benefited from having public schools. You'd like to see the government out of the public school business. But now you're put in charge of it. So then what happens? And you see, you know, just, you know, an open door welcoming to all the things that are threatening the existence of public education, charter schools, which are not doing that great in her home state of Michigan. I mean, let's look at Detroit and let's look at some of those places. They're not really benefiting. Charter schools aren't a solution to the whole issue of fixing education. They work in very small instances where some kids get fortunate and get to go to a really good one. But for the majority of American students, going to charter school is not going to solve your problem. It's only going to keep, you know, hyper segregation and all these other things. So it's these investments in these profitable industries that don't really change anything except they line people's pockets with money, and her families want to capitalize off of that.
Yeah, and I look at, starting on the day after Labor Day, we're going to begin confirming a Supreme Court justice in Brett Kavanaugh, who's all on board with charters. In fact, you can go back to 1999, 2001, where he was the co-chair of the Federalist Society's subcommittee on school choice. You can go back to 2000, where he was one of the lawyers who led the constitutional challenge on Florida's voucher law. During the Bush years, he was involved in all of that, and he even made decisions while sitting on the court. So again, you've got someone who's leading the Department of Education, who wants to destroy public education, move towards these charters and these vouchers. You're going to put a Supreme Court justice on the court who is right in line with all of that.
Yeah, and it's a very scary outcome in the future if you try and litigate these issues, where we're going to end up. I mean, it's funny, the idea of charters have been around since Reagan, since, a long time ago, and people have had the idea, but it's for other people's children. Nobody wants charters. Like, they don't push charter schools in these well-funded suburban school districts, right? Like, and I did some research when I was in law school about, if you look at charter schools in the Washington, D.C. area and where they're at, and if you break down we have 8 wards that make up the district, and, some are predominantly black, and some are predominantly white, and some are what I call gentrified, kind of mixed. All of the charter schools are in the predominantly black and brown neighborhoods. And then in the gentrified neighborhoods, they're there because the white parents wouldn't send their kids to the local public schools. So they create charter schools that are there for them. But in the majority white wards, there are none. Maybe one is about to start, but they don't want them there. So this is a solution not for everyone, not for the politicians, not for the people making these choices, not for Brett Kavanaugh's kids or grandkids or anyone in his family. It's for everybody else's children. And that should tell you something. If your idea is not something that you would put your child and your family through, then why is it good for anybody else?
No, you're right there. And this is why I think it's important for organizations like yours, the Badass Teachers, to get together the more articulate voices, the more articulate, radical, militant voices, if you will, to stand up and defend this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at it from all fronts. I mean, the data privacy thing we've been working on, we'll have a toolkit out about that soon. It's just seeing the results of the survey when I got to do some of the research on that, how teachers feel and how school districts are approaching. I mean, it really is it's just out there, and it's just out there for the taking, and no one's really thinking about, do we want to live in a world where all this data is collected about our children? And so that's a big issue. Another one we're looking at is, your pension is investing in companies that are supporting treating immigrants poorly, like building these centers out there where they're housing immigrant children. So what is you as a person, as a citizen, as a taxpayer, what right do you have to say, I don't know if I want my pension funding these sort of things? So we're looking at those campaigns as well. We're working with organizations like Journey for Justice and the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools to really look at how, historically, schools are set up to disadvantage some students, and what can we do about that, right? Whether it's a Journey for Justice report, failing Brown versus Board of Education, really looking at how, looking from when that happened in the 60s till now, we haven't really achieved what we were supposed to do in that Supreme Court settlement, and then the continuation of that. And so it's important work, and I think, teachers are there. They're fired up, Rick. They can't take it anymore. I mean, this is their livelihood. They built their life on this, and so they're digging in, and they want to see real change that they can believe in.
Well, I've been waiting for this for years as a union supporter. I've been waiting for our more articulate union members to step forward and carry the torch, because this is going to be fought on intellectual grounds as much as it is boots on the ground. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's still hard. I think one of the things I've learned organizing with teachers, and especially badass teachers, in the 5 years we've been together and through the 60,000 plus members, is you can't get a lot of teachers to agree on anything. Like, teachers are really diverse in their thinking, and it makes sense. We have a love for teaching children, but that doesn't mean that we agree on everything. But there is a belief that educators have a voice in this fight. They need to be respected. They have ideas. They know what they're doing. They're professionals. That's something I try and stress to my students all the time. I mean, you are the professional in the room. You've got the knowledge, you've got the training, you've got the experience. You have to come from that position, because it's important to see yourself, right? Because otherwise, not everybody else is going to treat you that way. And so that's really important. And I think, when you get past all of the differences, whether you support this or that, at the end of the day, teachers just want to do good work with children and help them turn out to be good people, and that's what we're really striving for. It's just, there's a million different ways to do that, but there are a lot of ways that you really shouldn't do that. So it's going to continue to be an interesting battle, but I have hope. I have hope that the teachers that I see that I work with are
They're really unstoppable. They've been fired up. I think, the downside of a Trump presidency is that it does fire up some people in a way that they need to be fired up,
No, I said from the beginning on Inauguration Day, he's going to be the great uniter, and hopefully he unites the country against him. That's been my view. But I look at this, and again, I come back to this idea. I remember when my daughter said she wanted to be a teacher, and I cringed. I can't imagine anyone is getting into this profession after all of the attacks and all of the stuff that's gone on, unless you're really, really passionate about it.
Yeah, I think it's, working in teacher education now for almost 15 years, what I see is there's been that big drop-off, right? It used to be this generational thing. We'd have our first day back. This was really prevalent when I worked at Howard. And the students would come in, and they'd come in with their mothers and their grandmothers, and they'd be sitting there, and the young girl's like, I want to be a teacher, and her mom and grandmother used to be really supportive, and now they're kind of like, no, right? So they see what the profession has become, and they're not sure they can even encourage their young daughter or granddaughter to go in this profession. But now we've seen a big turn. A lot of the new students I see, they're young, they're out of college, they don't have a lot of options. Teaching has always been that kind of profession where for some people, they don't really, and it's not a bad thing. I wanted to teach since I was 7. I mean, not everyone's born that way, making their poor younger sister sit through summer school because that's what you do when you want to be a teacher. But some people come to it later, or they're not even sure they want to do it. They just want a job, and they're willing to try anything. And so we've seen a big shift. But I think the scariest thing is we don't see a lot of teacher prep programs preparing teachers to do it for the long haul. A lot of the changers are like, you can come in and you can teach for 3 years, and then you can go on and do something with your life. That really scares me.
Teach for America, yeah.
Yeah, we need a profession that's going to say, yeah, you can come to this later in life. You could have done something else, but if you're going to do this, you're going to do this because this is what you want to do, right? We need people who are committed to it, and so that instance is something we need to look at. But there's definitely a big shift, and I don't see as many generational teachers coming from that. They may come from a long line, and that's because the profession is under attack.
And I hope people will check out your website, badassteacher.org. Lots of resources, lots of things there for teachers to get involved, also parents and students to take a look at as well. And Denisha, I appreciate the work you do and the time that you've shared with us and sharing some of your ideas. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Anytime.
Good stuff, Denisha Jones. And look, I hope you check out the website, badassteacher.org. We'll get links out at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day that became known for the Quebec Bridge disaster in Canada. Workers were building a cantilever bridge over the St. Lawrence River. This was not an easy task. The river was 2 miles wide at its narrowest point. The river was deep, moved quickly, and was icy in the winter. But in the late 1880s, businessmen in Quebec who wanted to keep up trade with Montreal decided the river had to be spanned. The project did not begin for more than a decade due to a lack of funds. Finally, the Canadian government supported the project to improve the nation's railway infrastructure. Theodore Cooper, a respected American bridge designer, was signed on for the project. Despite concerns about the bridge's design, he never visited the site due to illness. 86 men were working on the project that fateful day. Their workday was drawing to a close when the bridge suddenly collapsed. 75 men plunged to their deaths. Some of their bodies were never found. The bridge collapsed because of design flaws. The official report of the disaster noted that the loss of life, quote, might have been prevented by the exercise of better judgment on the part of those in responsible charge of the work for the Quebec Bridge and Railway Company and the Phoenix Bridge Company. Unfortunately, it was not the last tragedy trying to cross the St. Lawrence. After the bridge collapsed, the Canadian government took over the project. A partial collapse on that effort killed 13 more workers in 1916. The bridge finally opened in 1917. Its completion came at a high price, costing $22 million and 86 lives.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
A sad day in Arizona today, as John McCain lay in state in the Capitol there. Thousands of people lined up in the sweltering heat to pay their respects. Look, he was senator there for decades, and it's also being reported that I didn't realize his mother is still alive. His 106-year-old mother is planning on attending the funeral, the viewing in the Capitol in Washington, and attend the services. And I remember her from 2008. Quite an amazing woman, and the story there, it just sad stuff. But I think we have to pay our respects and honor him for the patriot and the statesman that he was. Even if I didn't agree with a lot of his positions. He was on the conservative side of most things, but you have to respect the service to the country and all of that. So our thoughts and all of that to the family there. A couple of quick things I wanted to bang through. I'm struggling to see, and it's one of these moments where we're heading into one of what I think is one of the more important holidays, Labor Day, and all of the battles and all of the history that goes along with it that nobody seems to know. And I look at this administration, who has done so much in such a short period of time to be so destructive. And in fact, this is going to be one of those scenarios where it's not going to be glaringly obvious until he's gone. And that's really the scary part in this to me. The regulatory attacks that they've done, the executive orders that they've done, the Supreme Court cases that have come and that are yet to come. Once this administration is out of office, and I'm hoping, as Scott Dworkin said, it's very soon. Once that happens, the cleanup from this disaster is going to be decades in the making, if we ever get back. And you look at Puerto Rico and again, I blame part of this on our mainstream media. I blame part of this on us. But they told us from the beginning, what was it, 64 people had died? And maybe that was the original number. It's now up to almost 3,000. And that's a fantastic job. And you still have people defending what he did, or in essence, what he hasn't done. And I was reading some of the articles from, right after the hurricane and when he went over to, for his photo op. And, he's chastising these people. You blew up our budget. You destroyed our budget. And you go, these are people who have lost virtually everything. And that's the kind of lack of compassion you get. We got a lot of growing up to do, and we've got a lot of growing back together to do. And the best thing that can happen to this country is come November, there's a washout of all of these extreme right-wing ideologues and these zealots and these corporate hacks, and out to the curb they go. And we then begin to go, how do we move forward? How do we pursue that more perfect union? How do we create an economy that works for everybody? If not, desperation class, the two Americas that John Edwards talked about. Desperation and extreme wealth. Scary stuff. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you get the podcast. We will be back on Tuesday after a short little hiatus over the holiday. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you then.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's color time.